Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
Hello there. Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show. We are glad to have everyone with us today. We appreciate you being a part of our growing listenership, and we are well into our third year. And Dan, glad to be continuing to do this with you, man. My co-host, Dan.
Yeah, we keep finding interesting things to talk about. So
that's right.
We'll keep doing this till that stops. But
there you go. Well, and I wanted to this week on the front end mention also our Bank Marketing Minute. If you get resource and benefit from these episodes, be sure and go to bankmarketingshow.com, and there you can sign up for our Bank Marketing Minute, which is snippet and quick excerpts of high value from our episodes and guest conversations and all of that you can get in your inbox every couple of weeks as well.
Not quite a transcript, but kind of key takeaways from the episodes and more. So
ones you can read in about a minute. Thus, the Bank Marketing Minute. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. Well, Dan, I am excited about our conversation today. You and I, and kicking around what directions that we wanted to go. It's a constant challenge in banking, in corporate leadership in general, to do it and to lead well. And the community financial institution realm is a particularly interesting one because it is a very, very long established, one of probably the oldest significant industries, in the U.S. and but one that needs to continue to grow with the times. And that's largely about leadership. And I know we wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit for what leadership means to us. But Dan, I'm excited about this conversation today.
Yeah, likewise. I think it's, as marketing people in the banking industry, I see a lot of banks that just leadership can help set culture, which can just help drive a lot of decisions. And I think, if you go on LinkedIn for 5 minutes, right, and you follow banking people, there's a lot written about this stuff. There's a lot about how do community banks are dying and how do they adapt and what do they need to do, and lots of different takes on that. And I think, we usually are talking about marketing here, but different styles of leadership, different leaders make different marketing decisions that have long-term impacts for their bank. So I think we have a really unique position in just seeing how leadership styles impact the way banks do marketing. And we're going to talk more about the leadership styles and the things that we see and the things that we don't see at a lot of banks here. But we're often, our marching orders when we're working with clients is often to help them with the marketing. And, we just want to talk today about kind of that gray area of sometimes it's not a marketing problem. It's making a decision to spend on marketing problem, which is a leadership thing.
Absolutely. And when we're working with banks around their brand messaging, all of those things, one of the key pieces is to ascertain the personality of each institution, right? Yep. And you and I know that is directly tied to leadership. And so we're going to go into that a bit more today and how crucial it is. Yes, it does directly impact marketing and ROI and bottom line revenue for banks that is largely around leadership. And then I know on the front end here, Dan, we also wanted to define what we mean by leadership, and that is certainly president, CEO, board leadership, CFOs, COOs, and it is all of those. But it also may be to a lot of our listeners, maybe you're leading your department, or maybe what your leadership is mainly in charge of are the responsibilities and the implementation of your position and how it impacts others. So it's not necessarily always just org chart, leadership.
Well, right. It could be just leading thought leadership. Right? Like,
there you go.
And if you're not in a specific position of leadership, it can be anyone. If you've got thoughts, speak up, and if you think the bank should be doing a specific project, like, you can jump in and lead that stuff without the formal org chart position. So I think all the things we're going to talk about here are good for anyone across the org.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to cover 3 of these key facets and areas today. And some of this, Dan, we knew as we were setting this episode up too, is going to take a little hard truth, maybe in some of these. Kind of a little bit of sometimes it's tough to look in the mirror and say, gosh, we really need to do better about that. Or I need to do better about that. And I see what kind of a positive impact that can have.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was saying to you before, right? Like, sometimes as I'm working with clients and I'm the marketing guy, right? Or I'm the, brought in to set some marketing direction or some marketing leadership. And I'll just see something kind of culturally. I'm like, this is part of the issue is this, but I'm not in a position to like bring it up. So, this is a good forum to sort of talk about, hey, we see this a lot. We can't always talk about it. But I think like this stuff needs to be talked about. And it's part of, I think, a little bonus facet here, right, of leadership is like the ability to kind of recognize your own flaws, right? Recognize nobody's perfect. No org is perfect. Everything is kind of moving and, morphing along. And so I think part of the overarching theme of this is like, do some introspection and think about
there you go.
What you're doing, as a leader and how that can change, how that can be made better all over time.
All families have dysfunctionality to one degree or another, right? And we'd love for that to not be the case, but that is the case. So let's kind of cover what some of those are and what leaders can do about it. Yeah. So.
Yep.
Well, as we were sketching out these key ones, Dan, the one of the first ones, and we intentionally wanted to cover this first, I think, was several pieces that fall under transparency. That means a lot of different things. We hear it in politics. We hear it in other situations. But I think some of that is, Dan, about questioning what level of information do we share with the whole team. And probably the way that banks did that, certainly 100 years ago or 50 years ago, or maybe even 20 years ago, is a little bit different answer these days, and in seeking to have group leadership, group input, all of those things to an extent, and really trying to figure out how much do I share with the team, whether that is financial goal information, or other things.
Yeah, problems that the bank is facing, right? Why you're doing the things that you're doing, right? I think as a leader, you need to choose what you share and what you don't share. I mean, there's going to be things that you don't share. Like the federal government has top secret, missions that they're not going to share with the general public. But like, you have to find the right level of like, if you're making a decision to cut or add budgets to certain departments, like, why? There's probably a good business reason for it. And, a lot of kind of old style management, or I don't know, long-standing management practices is like, hey, I'm the exec. I don't need to share, but like today people want to know. And I think it's being more transparent can, if done well, can create more trust. Right? I mean, if you're too transparent, right? If you're day-to-day sharing where your mind is at on things, it may be too much. Right?
That's
and then you're going to start, you let people a little too in and they're going to, it can actually detract from trust. But same thing, if you're not, not transparent enough, if you're not sharing why decisions are being made, not sharing some detail about the problems or what, chances are if there's a problem facing the bank, right, your whole staff already knows, or they know they have some inkling of it.
Yes.
You don't share anything, you could stand to lose more trust or you're killing your employees' motivation. And, because they kind of already know. And so talking about it a little bit shows, hey, I'm on top of this, right? Here's what we're doing to address it. And, you start a forum and people may have other ideas that they can bring to the table.
There you go. Dan, that's where I wanted to go with it as well, is all the points that you just made about being transparent about problems and challenges that are going on, but also that, seeking input. And if I'm completely honest about it, and I look at even my team structure here, and when I have brought some of those things to the table and how my managers and other folks have had ideas or solutions or perspectives that honestly I would have never thought of and never really seen, wow, that is a totally different way to skin that problem or address an issue. And I wouldn't have had that perspective. So
no, and I've definitely worked with bosses and, leaders in my career where intentionally, whether consciously or not, but intentionally holding back information. And, it's like it as an employee, it makes you feel like your opinion's not valued. And, it makes you feel like you're not important enough to be part of it. Where, yeah, you're in a different kind of org chart position, but that means you have a different perspective on the issue. And you're dedicating as much life to this, company as the executives are. There's different perspectives that can help drive the right outcomes.
Yep.
But you got to be listening for them, and you got to be sharing enough information to build that trust and build the motivation for employees to be thinking about the solutions.
Yep. Well, and one of those also you can categorize it under several different things, but that you and I were discussing was about leadership taking accountability for issues, and it's closely related to this. But in banks where I see that, hey, we tried this, it didn't work. I realized that I was the one as a leader that was on the forefront of that. It didn't work, so let's change gears. Or that there's so many different scenarios under which leadership taking some accountability creates more of the trust that you just mentioned, or maybe more of the buy-in because I'm willing to again seek input, or whatever the case may be, and so can be a big one as well, just by taking accountability. Humility is not humiliation. Humility oftentimes is about a transparency and a humanness that I think can create motivation and buy-in from others if done right.
Yeah, and I think it's a skill too, right? It can take time to kind of build it, but it's like it's always a push-pull in leadership, is because a lot of people get to a high position of leadership because you're confident, and you're not afraid of selling yourself and taking credit for things, but it's that balance of give your team credit so they can grow into leaders as well. And I think modern management is much more about what you're taking credit for is not all the individual actions that your team takes, but the crafting of the team and the running of the machine to get the right outputs.
Yeah.
But you're not taking credit for every little gear and every little movement of the stuff in the machine. That's your team, and they should take credit, and they should be, build up. So transparency is just being part of that and saying, hey, we had this little problem, but honestly, if you're not having problems here and there on certain things, you're not probably trying hard enough. You're not pushing the boundaries enough.
Right, not pushing the envelope. That's right.
Yeah, and it's not about avoiding all problems at all times. It's about what do you do when you have a problem? How do you, and this is a good segue to our next point, but how do you adapt to fixing the problem? How do you, communicate that to your team when it happens? Because problems are just part of life.
There you go. Well, and the last piece under transparency too, Dan, that occurs to me as I was taught by a mentor of mine years ago, essentially don't come to me with a problem without a suggested solution as well. So that is in reverse for leaders, is what you were talking about, is just that transparency and taking accountability. But guys, here's what we're going to do about it, or here are opportunities for correcting this issue or whatever the case may be. So, and you're right, that leads very well into adaptability, our second big point. Yeah, there's a lot that falls under this one too in modernizing leadership. Dan, you're correct.
Yeah. Well, and then just as time goes on, like, the pace of technology gets faster, and the pace of communications gets faster, and the people expect you to be reacting on social media quickly, and it's, if your leadership style is not adapting, you can't move as quickly to those things, and you can't, it goes back to the trust and, motivation piece of, if you're not reacting to the increased pace of change, it can put you even further behind.
Sure. Well, and every organization and every leader is going to deal with challenges. We've talked about some of them: burnout, personality conflicts, with others in your organization, ethical choices, ones that go well and ones that don't, or facing difficult ethical choices, whatever the case may be. And there just always are challenges. And in banking, there are regulatory challenges, and they're sometimes challenges are created by outside entities or organizations, or rate changes, right? Or those that if you don't have adaptability and you're not willing to move quickly, then you're behind in this day and age, for sure.
Well, I've just seen so many banks that have took a long time to get on social media, took a long time to realize that you need a better digital banking platform. I've been working with banks for 7 years, right? Which is a fraction of the time that a lot of other folks have been working in banks. But it's like, even in that time, the first few banks I worked with was like, yeah, we don't have mobile deposit. We don't really need it. And now it's like it's almost like if you don't have it, like, and it's looking ahead and realizing, well, my mobile deposit is, something that young people want and use, and that's who we really need as customers. But, if it takes you a few years to kind of adapt to that kind of technology changes, you might not use mobile deposit. You might not be the most kind of technologically savvy person, and that's okay. Right. But that doesn't mean you're a bad leader. But if you don't recognize that and think about that as your, a flaw or a thing to work on yourself, then that's kind of the adaptability problem, right? Is you don't have to go back to school and, get your master's in computer science or whatever. But it's recognizing, hey, I need to pass this along. Times are changing and we need a tech budget. And maybe I'm not the person to manage that tech budget. We need to get a IT director to do it, something like that. But like, be adaptable and realize that, people, customers, employees may want things that you don't believe in yourself, but are important to them for their own reasons.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and another key set of things I think under adaptability, Dan, is also, call it modernization if you want, but sometimes is even the composition of your leadership and who that is. For example, all community banks want younger customers, correct? And we're all seeking that. And you and I have had multiple industry leaders on as guests who have discussed that, and we all know that. But, that can even be reflected in your leadership that have new and dynamic ideas and are more digitally savvy, and those types of things, to have younger people moving up in your leadership roles. And that's key. Another one that comes to mind, and there's a couple of guys sitting here talking about this, but is women in leadership. And while I won't name them, not too long ago, one of our clients had a transition in the bank, and a woman that became the president of the bank and was only the fourth one in a president, or fourth woman in a president or CEO role in a community bank in that entire state. And it's like, yeah, that ball has been rolling way too slow,
right,
to move in that direction for that to be the case. And seeing just really dynamic leadership things happen there with women and younger people, in those positions. And it's expansion of input, it's different perspectives, it's dynamics, because in this day and age, it's more about the quality of the leadership, in my opinion. And that's, really, really crucial.
Yeah. It's, what the adage of it's always worked this way. And, the bank has survived for 100 years without this, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to, what is the past performance? It's not an indicator of future success. Like the world is changing, and it's changing faster than ever before. And, whereas in the past, the pace of change was slower and you could get away with not changing for longer.
Mm-hmm.
That's not happening anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I know we didn't want to leave adaptability without talking about leading by example, Dan, and some of the important elements of, I think, the human relationship components of real leadership, of real quality leadership, and a lot of what those are, or excuse me, should be, as we consider this. You and I were talking about compassion, for example, which ties in very closely with avoiding judgment, of others, because of all types of reasons and scenarios. But having more of that compassionate environment. You said early on in this episode, and you were talking about culture and corporate culture and team culture and those types of things. And if your barometer of compassion and avoiding judgment and those types of things is not there, then you need to take a hard look at that.
Yeah,
as a leader.
Yeah, I think it's, post-COVID, right? In coming back to the office, working, hybrid work setups for certain staff. That's where compassion and, avoiding judgment can come into play. Like, understand your staff have lives, and they're dedicating a lot of their lives to your bank. And if you can kind of try to understand from their perspective too, like you'll get more productivity out of them, more commitment to the bank if, you provide a little flexibility back.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that way 10, 15, 20 plus years ago. You're expected to be in your seat. But today, like, if you want younger people at your bank, as customers, you need to understand that more. And if there are younger people working in the bank, you'll probably bring in some younger customers. And it all kind of goes full circle. And it all starts from that place of just compassion and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's under adaptability because it's just adapting to the new world.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, so transparency and adaptability and a whole lot under both of those, but I know we wanted to cover those first to kind of set the stage for our last big key component here. And that's really about the implementation of the vision.
Yep.
And being I've heard for a long time that being, the role of the leader is to be the visionary for the organization. So if I'm setting the direction for where the ship is going, then it's really crucial that I'm able to lead implementing that, but I'm not going to do it alone. And I've got to do it with consideration of all the things we've talked about thus far in the episode, around transparency and adaptability and those types of things. But to me, a leader also has to be very defined in who they are, what their leadership style, is, and what does that leadership mean. And, sometimes people get opportunities to be in leadership roles because they've assumed that role, or they came into the family and the family owned the bank for generations, or whatever the case may be, but maybe haven't really defined their leadership style, and being very intentional, I guess is the right word for that, and being able to set a direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think if you're intentional about it, it just helps your team know what to expect and know, who they're working for. Again, going back to building trust and knowing if it's a place they want to work. If they're confident that it's a place they want to work, they're going to be a better fit for the team and drive more value for you. And you mentioned the ship. Like, everybody's on the ship, and I think people deserve to know why it's going in a certain direction, right? And that's up to you as a leader to kind of just share the level of detail of that you want. But we're dedicating a lot of our life to this. Why are we going down this path?
Yeah.
and making sure they know that. And there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of literature out there that, shows if your team shares the vision, then you're more likely to get there, and people are going to be happier on the way. And I think, that's well known, but in working with a lot of banks, I just don't see enough of like that vision development.
Mm-hmm.
So many banks are like, yeah, we've been around 100 years, so we're going to be around the next 100, but like have a hard time describing their growth goals. Like even just, again, like I said at the beginning of this episode, like I'm sharing some stuff I would never be able to say directly to banks. And it's not every bank, right? But it's like, you'd think going into most businesses, you can say like, well, what's your growth goals? What are you planning on doing? Where do you think that's going to come from? And banks, I'm generalizing, but can't do that. Can't say, they can't all say, here's how much deposit growth we want, right? Or maybe they can say that, but then they can't bring it to the next level and say, okay, well, we need 10 million in new deposits, and here's the growing parts of our market.
Mm-hmm.
Is 35-year-olds buying their first home, whatever. But they can't.
Or the growth of our team that goes along with that.
Yeah.
All of those things, yeah.
They can't quantify it. And then it's probably partly also because, like, if you're healthy, you don't go to the doctor. The banks that I find myself working with, like, are looking for marketing help because they can't break that down. They know they need to double in size the next 5 years or whatever, but they're not sure how to do it. But I think it's super important to understand that vision, not just we want our ROA percentage to increase. Mm-hmm. We want our deposits. We need this many more commercial, and not just understand that, but how it's going to happen and how staff can contribute to it.
Dan, if you polled my team of 15 folks here as a marketing agency about the 64, 65 community bank clients that we work with across 16 states, and today, if you ask them what is the biggest common factor that is a sense of who that bank is and their personality and their drive and their goals, as you mentioned, and all of that, the ones that are most successful and that are moving forward and that have vision and direction and all of that, probably the best description of that is they're going to have some level of a growth mindset.
Yeah.
It's that mindset. And it's that, and that has to start, that starts obviously with leadership, but it's also through and through. So the marketing director has that same sense of energy for growth and, what we're doing and putting it together that the CEO does, that probably the board does, that, mid-level management does, and hopefully that protrudes all the way to the frontline staff. And it's this, and it's literally like a human personality. And you meet some that are just dynamic, and you meet some that are like, that guy hasn't gotten out of his chair or done anything exciting in 15 years, and I think it's that same thing. It's that growth mindset, or it's that vision mindset that is through and through the organization that starts with leadership.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way too. Like, if you don't have that vision set, you go to your marketing team and you say, we need more deposits. Do more marketing. Yeah, okay. Marketing team's going to go run some Google ads. Going to go start doing some more Facebook posts. Mm-hmm. But they don't know who they're talking to, right? They just know, give us your money. And it is not going to work, right? And that I've seen a million times. It does not work. And then you end up as like, well, we spent all this money, done all this stuff. Marketing doesn't work. But if you come at it and say, we need more deposits, and here's where I think they're going to come from, or we know this bank up the street has a great niche of this type of customer, we want to chip away at that, right? Then you can develop a campaign or do some things that are speaking to the, farmer inheriting from their retiring family. Like, whatever it is, whatever that target is, it's much easier when you're talking to a person. That's why, banks do, marketers build persona groups and that type of stuff. But I think at a bank, it comes from the leadership and comes from just painting that vision, not just of growth, but of how that growth is going to be attained. And then that painting that vision, disseminating across the organization gets everybody on board. Where the ship is. Everybody knows where the ship is going. And subconsciously, people and consciously, but if everybody knows where the ship is going, you start doing things that help you get there.
Yeah. Dan, putting a cap over everything that we've discussed on this episode, and it has to do with vision and implementation of the vision, but it's really the big question, I guess, for all of this is to speak directly to each one of our listeners at this moment and call it elevator speech, call it whatever you want to do, but not for the organization, but for each person as a leader individually. And that is the question, is that what guides you? This is kind of the Simon Sinek, what's your why? What's your, all of those things. And for all of our listeners, some of them can probably answer that very specifically and very directly. And if so, good for you. And some are probably still trying to figure that out. Or even trying to decide how important is that really, because I've just got too much on my desk today, yep. So I need to just keep going. And that's not really what it is. So each of us, in whatever our leadership role is, figuring out what guides you is really the big key question. And again, propagates itself in everything that we've already covered in this episode. So whether that is deciding what your North Star is that a set of ethics, that are incredibly important to you? Is it faith that's incredibly important to you, and that's what guides you? Is it, sense of accomplishment? Anyway, all of these things, and everyone needs to answer that whole set of questions. I'm my wife and sometimes my team, kind of giggle at me, but sometimes, but they, I'm constantly into podcasts and business improvement, self-improvement, and all of those kind of things, and pushing the new direction. And because personally and individually, I'm very sure about what it is that guides me.
Yeah.
And the big reason of my why and what guides me in my job every day. And I hope that then becomes transparent as a leader to the entire organization. Right, Dan? And that's the premise of what it is that we're talking about. So everyone that's listening to the show today, asking themselves, what is it that guides you?
Yeah.
If you're not really sure about what that is, then I think that's the first and the big step here.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's core, right? And that tells you, if that's clear to your team, then it tells you they should share some of that, and that they're in the right place. And I think it can be lots of different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Money drives everybody to some extent, some more than others. It could be just, drive to create something, ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Religion is a big factor for a lot of people. And, you have to be, it's okay to have religion drive you. And maybe in your bank culture, it's not something you want across, to push too hard in the workplace. But if that's an important driver for you, even if your team doesn't share your same religion, like they might share your sense of faith, or sense of ethics, or sense of values. And, having open discussions about that can really be a motivator for a lot of folks.
Yeah. I mean, Dan, it's a basic human premise that people are attracted to attractive people. And what being attractive people means is people that are sure, confident, self-assured, sure about their own personal North Star and their direction, and those types of things. Correct. As you say, even if it's a little different than what mine may be or hers may be, or whatever the case, that's okay also. In fact, that's actually really beneficial, in my opinion, in a lot of instances. That's what, so that attraction to those that are assured of their reason and what they're guided by, and then how that kind of the mustard spreads across the whole organization, as a result of that. It's, it's very contagious.
Yeah.
And we all know that by people that we're attracted to, that are either mentors or they're, spiritual leaders or whatever they are. And there are reasons for that. So as we're considering leadership in organizations here, those are just kind of there to fill a chair, so to speak, or not. Not the ones that we're going to be highly motivated to follow. Yep. or lead alongside. So,
yep.
No.
Yeah. Well, so now everybody listening, you have some homework.
That's right.
Figure out what guides you. Write it down. take 10 minutes in a quiet spot and think about it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So, Dan, I know you're wouldn't mind me sharing personally that you're into and good at some mindfulness and some centering of self that is about what you're just saying. And mine is largely about faith and other things and all of those, and all of the above are true and correct and coexist together very well to do what it is that Jesus said. Challenge yourself. Take a moment and, what is it that guides you? And then what does that look like in your work life?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome question. So, okay. Man, good stuff today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah. I think it's exciting to, exciting is probably the wrong word, but it's good to share some of these things that don't get talked about enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, that they're not easy things for me as a consultant to bring up with my clients. They're not easy things for employees to bring up with leaders, but they're there and they're important and they make a big difference in the future of your bank and the growth of your bank. And, if you're thinking about them, you're well ahead of a lot of the pack.
There you go. That's right. So very cool. Well, great to do this with you today. As always, Dan, appreciate it very much. Great conversation and great takeaways for everyone. And as a reminder, go to bankmarketingshow.com. That's where you can catch more episodes. We've certainly had some really dynamic leaders, and I've thought about several of them as we've talked today that have been on as guests on numerous episodes with us in the past, and invite you to check out some of those as well. And again, sign up for the Bank Marketing Minute and engage with us on LinkedIn, other places as well. So looking forward to what's next to come, Dan.
Yeah, I've got some good guests coming up in the next few episodes. So hit subscribe, stay tuned.
There you go. Great, man. Take care. Have a great day, Dan.
You too.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.